we found that there were many more votes in favor of, say, climate change shareholder proposals or other environmental proposals by the decentralized voters, by the external sub-advisors, than there had been by the index fund's internal stewardship team.
Welcome to FTSE Russell Convenes. I'm Stephanie Maier. I'm Global Head of Sustainability at FTSE Russell, and in this session we're talking about decentralising proxy voting power and investor democracy. And I have a huge pleasure to welcome Laura Starks to talk about that. Laura, you've written a huge amount of research around proxy voting, corporate governance, and a lot of other sustainable finance themes. Your latest paper, looking at this topic in particular, could you give us some of the key findings?
Yes, so we were interested in what's happening with investor democracy in proxy voting in the United States. And we were particularly interested in if we could predict how investor choice programs by the very large index funds as well as other asset managers would result in changes in the proxy voting.
And what did you find?
So what we found was we looked at an instance before these investor choice programs. In 2019, Vanguard decentralized their proxy voting to their external portfolio managers, in other words, their sub-advisors. So it was 31% of their equity funds that they had decentralized the proxy voting. So we looked at how those funds voting on proxies differed from the Vanguard stewardship team. And we found that there was quite a big difference in the proxy voting. And in particular, we found differences in the voting for directors. It was lower positive votes.
So this issue of whether the voting decision should be passed through to the end beneficiary or whether it stays with the investment manager is obviously a very topical one. Where do you see this issue going, or what type of other research are you keen to do next?
There is so much interest in this that they have, there are new firms that have developed in order to help investment managers allow for this investor choice. And I predict that we will see even more in the future because there's increasing interest by investors, by shareholders and mutual funds in being able to express their beliefs or being able to vote according to the risk that they see.
And you talked earlier about the difference in voting from the standard manager approach to when you actually had that pass-through voting. You talked a bit about directors. Can you talk a bit about shareholder resolutions as well? That's a very topical issue. How did you see some of that vote behaviour change?
We found that there were many more votes in favor of, say, climate change shareholder proposals or other environmental proposals by the decentralized voters, by the external sub-advisors, than there had been by the index fund's internal stewardship team. We also found that there were many more votes in favor of the social shareholder proposals, and actually also in favor of the governance shareholder proposals.
I know it's a topical issue here in the US, but how do you see maybe the number of shareholder resolutions changing over time? It's been very active and a very important part of the voting process. How do we see some of the changes now maybe impacting that?
Well, it's been an important part of the proxy season, and it's been an important way in which many investors are able to convey their opinions to the management of the companies. What we've also found is that sentiment affects the ESG sentiment, and the financial sentiment from market psych affects the number of shareholder proposals that get presented to a firm. So when sentiment is very negative about a firm, you're much more likely to see a shareholder proposal arise. And having this Investor democracy then allows the shareholders to provide their views, which can back up the fund managers if they want to engage with companies about these issues.
We're certainly seeing more and more of this pass-through voting enabled by technology, and a lot more choice being enabled through this mechanism. But I think it's safe to say it'll be an interesting area to continue to look at, and I'm sure you'll be doing a lot more research in that area. So thank you very much for sharing your findings and insights.
Thank you.